The inaugural season in the MAC is almost in the books. We will take a look at the second semester in its entirety, breaking down the top moments and recapping personal and team accomplishments. We also have a few visitors in the studio. Our analysts will break down everything you need to know. This is the final episode of the year. Stick it here. You're not going to want to miss it. Welcome to the Q30 Sports Spring Semester Recap. I'm your host, Morey Hershgordon, and I'm delighted to bring you guys the semester recap. First, we'll take a look at the men's and women's ice hockey teams. Rand Pecknold's men's ice hockey team started the year 13-1-1, but faltered the rest of the way, finishing their final 25 games with a mediocre 11-9-5 record. They finished in third place in the ECAC regular season. They bowed to Colgate in the ECAC playoffs and then were shut out for the first time since the national championship game last spring, 4-0 against Providence in the first round of the NCAA tournament in Bridgeport. Now I bring in our hockey experts, Gabbi, Riggi, and Marty Joseph. Guys, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Morey.
What did you guys see as the turning point in the Bobcats season?
Go ahead.
I think it was the loss to St. Lawrence, 3-2 here up at the bank. They had a late 2-1 lead. They gave up 2 goals late in that third period. And from that point on, the season just really didn't look like the confidence was there. They finished the season 4-5-1 after that loss, and 3 of those 4 wins were against Yale. In the wins they had, the 4 wins they had, they outscored teams 23-5. In the losses, they were outscored 16-6. So the confidence just really wasn't there from the start. They had leads in some games, they blew them. If they got behind, they weren't able to come from behind, like the Providence game, as you mentioned. They had a lead, a 2-0 lead against Colgate in the ECAC tournament, and they ended up losing in double overtime. So I really think that the St. Lawrence game kind of exposed their lack of confidence and their lack of experience. And I ultimately think that was a turning point in the season.
I'm going to completely agree with you there. In the post game, the captain Corey Hibbler said that in that game they hit the panic button. But I think from that point on in the season, it was just sort of a panicky kind of season. It was a game where you could see a lot of their mistakes. They underplayed their opponent a lot, and they had the opportunity. They were number 3 in the country at that time, and they missed a big one. It was again like last season. They were upset by St. Lawrence. It was history almost repeating itself for this team, and I definitely think it was that St. Lawrence game.
Confidence might have been down, but was Jordan Samuels-Thomas's absence any type of factor?
It was definitely a factor, and I know we talked about that all year long, especially on this show, but I think what people look past is that Clarkson game the night before. That was a heavily contested battle. Both teams were hitting each other the whole night. There was a lot of penalties, a lot of hitting. Rand Pecknold was really upset the way his team played, and you look, they come out the next night, and I mean, this team's been attributed to their depth all year long, the last 2 years. They look like they ran out of gas in that third period, and I think you can probably look at that too as maybe a turning point, even though they won that game. But you look at the only team they really looked confident against the rest of the season was the 3 games against Yale. Yeah, they win that 8-0 game up at St. Lawrence, kind of a bit of a payback game. But other than that, you really didn't see them play the confident brand of Bobcat hockey that you saw the previous year and a half. And I think it's a testament to not only their youth, but their inexperience. I'm sure they brought back plenty of members from the team that went to the national championship the year before. But especially in that Providence game, they just didn't look like they knew what to do. They got hit early. They got a couple goals scored against them, and they just couldn't recover.
Yeah, I'm going to completely agree with you again. Just teams have to deal with losses of players all the time, and we have talked about this a lot on these shows, how losing people like Dan Federico, like Jordan Samuels-Thomas. The team, I think with or without him, sure, he brought a physical edge and a power play that they needed, but there were so many other holes in the game that even having him there, we saw this in the ECAC tournament, he had returned, but he still wasn't the keystone. There was a lot of other things that were missing in the team's game.
A bright part for the season was freshman forward Sam Annis. Sam Annis was the 2014 National Rookie of the Year. He led all the NCAA Division I freshmen in goals, points, goals per game, and points per game. If you take him off of this team, what record do they have? Do they even have 20 wins? Are they even in the NCAA tournament?
Well, if you look at it, his season statistically, he had some multi-point games in games where if he doesn't get those points, they don't win those games. The 3-3 ties against Yale and Providence at the beginning of the year, he had goals in those. So you can argue that if he doesn't score those goals, they obviously don't win. He had a couple big multi-point games against Bentley and Holy Cross in the beginning of the season, but it's tough to say you take one player off this roster and they don't repeat into the national tournament. So I think that, especially how this team runs around its depth, I think it's hard to argue that if you take one player, especially a freshman off this team, that they don't make the national tournament. I mean, I think you could have put anyone with the Joneses this year, and I think they would have produced, because the Joneses, I think they had their best full-on season at Quinnipiac. So I think you could have plugged Matt Pekka, maybe even Travis St. Dennis up on that top line. And I wouldn't say that they produced upwards of 40 points, but I think they still would have been able to win 20 games and still get into the tournament.
Yeah, this team had the scoring. You have 6 guys, aside from Sam Annis, who had more than 10 goals. You have your strong defense, and you had Michael Gartig, who had an incredible year this year. You know, as you said, Marty, you take one guy off this roster, it might be a little bit of a different team, but I think they still would have been able to make that national tournament.
So now let's look forward to next season. Dan Federico and Matthew Pekka have been named as captains for next year's team. Do you guys like the selection?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, they're the only 2 returning seniors in the squad. One's a forward, one's a defenseman. Maybe not the most vocal of leaders, but they clearly set example by the way they play on the ice. Danny Federico is probably the best all-around defenseman on the team the last 2 seasons. He got better as he played with Mike Dalhousen last year, and he carried it over into this year. Clearly the number 1 defenseman. Maybe you argue at times Tolkien upped his play a little bit more, but other than that, I think he's the number 1 defenseman. And Matt Pekka will be the only senior forward on the team, and he sets by example on the ice as well. You never really see him make a bad play either. Sure, sometimes he turns the puck over. He might have some trouble with his footing every now and then, but I think it makes sense to have 2 seniors as captains.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I think we saw this season Dan Federico stepped into the play, led that young defensive core that Quinnipiac had, and he held down the fort for that end. So I think him, and Pekka has always been a vocal guy, and he's very good with dealing with the press afterwards, so he's a good guy to have in that locker room as well.
Well, the men's team looks like they are ready to go for next year. Now let's turn our attention to Rick Seeley's women's team, who ended their 2013-2014 campaign with a 22-6-9 overall record, the best season in program history. Kelly Babstock became the first woman and 3rd player in school history to eclipse the 200-point mark for her career. The team made a trip to the ECAC semifinals before a loss to Clarkson, the eventual national champion. Had it not been for Boston University upsetting Boston College in the Hockey East Championship, the Bobcats would have been in the NCAA tournament for the first time in program history. Now let's look towards next year. Can this team make the NCAA tournament, and if so, why?
I definitely think they will be able to. They were a very strong team this year. I think a lot of pieces that they were unsure about came into place. There was the strength in goaltending. You had 2 brand new goaltenders come in, and they played past anyone's expectations. You had obviously all that strong offensive play. I think the one thing that they hurt them and definitely cost them their chance this year was all of their ties. I think if they can become much more of a finishing team, they can definitely make the NCAA tournament next year.
Yeah, I like what you say with finishing. They need to find a way to win the close games and win a big game. They had 9 overall ties, 7 of them were in the conference. If those turn into wins, you find a way to get maybe a late goal in those games. Those turn into wins, you're looking at a possible 3 or even a 2 seed in the conference. And those wins will obviously give you more credit towards an at-large bid. So I think if they could have turned those ties into wins, they could have probably potentially been one of the last at-large teams in, maybe as a 7 to the 8 seed. But they need to find to win those. And then the last couple of years, they've gone up and they've lost in the ECAC semifinals. So they need to find a way to win the big game on the road. Clarkson, the team that won the national championship, they're losing 7 seniors. Quinnipiac only losing 4. Yeah, Kelly Babstock, but I think they're bringing back some key pieces. Hopefully, having a healthy Nicole Costa and bringing back Unya Hansen as well will be huge for this team.
Marty, you mentioned winning big games next year. Is it going to be the offense, the defense, or the goaltending that's going to be the most important facet?
It's going to be the offense because the defense and goaltending is there, as Gabbi just mentioned. 5th overall in total defense. Chelsea Layton had a career year coming in as really her first odds-on year as a starter. The defense, even with Kelly Babstock, was only ranked 14th. So that's a middle-of-the-pack offense. That's a middle-of-the-pack offense in the nation. And especially with losing her, I think that's going to be the biggest thing. But you got key returning players in that offensive side of things. You're going to bring in, obviously, some recruits as well. So I think offense, though, is the X factor. This team wants to make a run at the ECAC and try to get into the national tournament.
I think next year it's going to be the goaltending. You see 2 brand new goaltenders for this team come in and have a combined 6 losses. They held down the fort for this team. If those two, if Layden and Rossman can come back again next year and hold down the fort like they did for this Bobcats team, they can definitely give the offense and the defense the basis that they need and the foundations they need to be successful.
Guys, thank you for your insight. We'll be back with you in a little bit. The men's basketball team exceeded most expectations this year in their inaugural year in the MAC. Picked to finish 7th in the conference, the dynamic play of big man Ike Azatam, accompanied by a breakout season by both Zaid Hurst and Usman Drame, along with the experienced guard play of Umar and Shaq Shannon, they ended up finishing 3rd without a season injury loss to Umar Shannon, which sidelined him for the playoffs. This team was capable of winning a MAC championship. With that being said, I now bring in Dylan Fearon and Tom Albanese, who followed this team very closely this year. Gentlemen, with both Shannons leaving due to graduation, do you see Evan Conti and Kasim Chandler as the starting backcourt for the Bobcats next season?
Yeah, Morey, I definitely see that because Evan Conti, we've seen him be that dynamic three-point shooter, and he's been definitely getting better over his last 2 years, especially in his sophomore and his junior year. And Kasim Chandler, yes, he did get interfered a little bit by the injury bug a little bit during this season, but he was able to really step up his game, especially in the MAC tournament, Morey, because this is a team where they really competed hard in the MAC tournament, and unfortunately they did. Losing to Manhattan wasn't obviously on their list of stuff to do, obviously, in terms of winning the championship. But Kasim Chandler in that game, Dylan, he played over 30 minutes against some of those big Manhattan bodies, only committed 1 turnover. And he's able to really control the ball, and Tom Moore is going to definitely look at both him and Conti to really lead that guard play next season.
I don't know, guys. I mean, Evan Conti really likes coming off the bench. And you said he was a dynamic three-point shooter. I think he started 0 for 25 maybe this season from 3. Right. James Ford is a very good three-point shooter, and Evan Conti likes to come off the bench and produce on the court. And I think James Ford is going to be the starting 2 for this Quinnipiac Bobcats team, along with Kasim Chandler. I mean, it's obviously very hard to replace 2 great guards like Umar and Shaq Shannon, but that's the best that they can do. I think they're going to go with James Ford.
But Dylan, we didn't see James Ford that much this season. Obviously, there were times
until the second half when Evan Conti was struggling.
But
they brought in James Ford.
But the times where Evan Conti did get that starting nod, I think that really energized him. Only a couple of games, but they still made impact for the Bobcat team. And even not even last year, but back at his sophomore year, he had several starts when he was in there. It energized him, and I think that's going to help him, especially in his senior year, because he's the type of guy that's energized and trying to get this team a MAC title for this entire collegiate career. And he's someone that I think will be the leader.
I think he's going to like coming off the bench and be that 6th man for this team, and I think they're going to start James Ford, in my opinion.
Tom, I do think Evan Conti is the way to go off the bench. If it's James Ford Jr. starting or another guard, only time will tell. But I want to ask you guys this. You know, with the losses that Manhattan, Canisius, and Iona are all going to endure, can this team be better than it was this year?
You know, I think they really can be, Dylan, because, again, the loss of Ike Azatam and both the Shannons are issues that this team is going to have to deal with moving forward. But all the recruits that you have coming in for this team, led by Sam Dingba, who's going to really be that new Ike Azatam. Obviously, it's going to take him time to really get into the collegiate level, especially in the MAC. But this guy, I think he's going to end up being that good replacement for Ike Azatam. And along with all the returning guys, like as we talked about with Conti, James Ford, this is a type of team that can really do such a great job and just bouncing back with all this leadership that they have. And Manhattan losing their 3 best players, Michael Alvarado, George Beeman, and Ramel Brown. Canisius is losing Billy Barron, and obviously Iona's losing a key player as well in Sean Ormond. So obviously this is going to be 3 opponents, obviously, that I think Quinnipiac can end up doing well against.
Guys, on this show, countless times we have talked about Ike Azatam possibly being the best player to ever come through Quinnipiac, the basketball program. Losing him is huge, and losing the 2 Shannons are also very huge losses. We don't know about the recruits aside from Dingba. Iron Hutton's from Virginia. He has connections with James Ford. Chase Daniels is from New Haven, very close to Quinnipiac. He might just be coming. We don't know how good they can be. You can't trust that. We also did not talk about Siena, Fairfield, and St. Peter's. 3 teams that were rebuilding this year and 3 teams that can be very, very good in MAC play next year. Great coaching staffs over in Poughkeepsie for Siena. They've made runs before. Their coach took Loyola Maryland to the NCAA tournament a couple years ago. Also, 2 years ago in the MAC tournament, we saw the 4 seed play the 6 seed in the championship game. We don't know what can happen, but this team will not be nearly as good as this year's squad was. Losing Ike Azatam and the 2 Shannons, not even close.
Tom, I love the point about Samuel Dingby. He's a highly talented freshman recruit. Dylan, I love the point about Siena. They won the CBI tournament this year. They're bringing back a lot of their starters. Let's go over to the women's side. Trisha Fabry's team was oh so close to making their 2nd straight NCAA tournament appearance. But after a 30-3 mark last year, the team came in with high expectations and had one of the toughest out-of-conference schedules in the country. But they were 0-6 against the top 3 teams in the conference during the regular season, and they were faced with a lot of questions entering the postseason. Anchored by senior forward Brittany McQueen, they defeated Canisius, then top-seeded Iona, and were beating MAC powerhouse Marist for about 34 minutes in the championship game, but the Red Foxes prevailed 70-60. Guys, is Sam Guastella, Jasmine Martin, and Boo Abshire enough of a core to return this team to the big dance?
No, not even close. And you said it before, Morey, anchored by Brittany McQueen. That's a huge piece. She was one of the best big men in the MAC. Losing her is unbelievably huge. This team won't be anywhere close to the Ionas or the Marist. Iona returns Tamika Martinez, who was a junior and a first-team All-MAC selection. This team, Tom, won't be even close to this year's squad, I think, only because Brittany McQueen was a great leader on and off the court. Yes, Boo Abshire and Jasmine Martin and Sam Guastella are going to return and produce great offensive statistics. But in terms of just the team itself and the defense intensity for 40 minutes, losing Brittany McQueen is huge, and they won't be even close to the Ionas or the Marist of the MAC.
I definitely agree with you on this one. And this is the main reason. Boo Abshire is a good point guard, but she's not supposed to be on the court for the scoring ability. She has to just control the ball and make sure that she gives her teammates good looks on the court. Jasmine Martin this season wasn't really her best year, and you saw good times where she did really well, but then the next couple of games she went on a kind of like it came down a little bit on her, and we didn't see those numbers that she produced. And Brittany McQueen was the leader, and I completely agree with you on that one. They're going to need a lot more help on the forward position with her leaving. Obviously, Sam Guastella is going to obviously be the main contributing factor because she can rebound and she can hit the three-pointer. Obviously, 2 things that she can possess.
But we didn't really see Sam Guastella in the postgame that often. We saw her trailing for threes. We saw her playing defense. We didn't really see her post up. That was more of McQueen's job.
Absolutely. But she's going to probably have to really adjust to that role, especially this season. And I think another key X factor that we have to take a look at here, Nicolai Ostegard, someone else that's big and goes down low in order to grab those rebounds and put up those layups. That's something that Brittany McQueen did all the time, and now she's going to have to pick up the pieces.
So, gentlemen, is this team going to have a new identity if they're not going to play in the half court? Because people like Nicolai Ostegard, Adelie Martucci, Maria Napolitano, Morgan Manns, they're guards, a big man in there that can run the floor, along with Boo Abshire. She had one of the best assist ratios in the country. So is this team going to have a new identity? Is that going to be the point of emphasis?
No, I feel like Fabry's coaching style has been the same for years. It's going to remain the same. It's just going to be a lot less performance-wise than what we saw this year because of McQueen. We're going to see Bree Ramos and Adelie Martucci getting more minutes. We'll see freshmen come in. It's going to be the same type of coaching, the same style of basketball, just, I think, less quality.
And with the players that have left the team and now with the ones that are going to hopefully come in being recruits with this team, you're going to see that same exact coaching style. She did adjust her coaching style a little bit this year, back 2 years ago when she had the whole 5 substitutions in, 5 substitutions out strategy that she had. She changed it up a little bit this year. But look where it got them. It got them all the way to the MAC championship against Marist. So Trisha Fabry has this coaching style. She's always been a consistent coach, and she's going to definitely lead this team back into the playoff picture again next season.
So very quickly, if the Bobcats win the MAC and make the NCAA tournament, is there a possibility head coach Trish Fabry could take a position as a head coach somewhere else, such as a conference of the A10 or the CAA?
Well, excuse me, Tom. Morey, honestly, I don't think they're going to make the NCAA tournament. I think if Fabry was going to leave, because she's been here for so long, she was going to leave, she would have left when they made it last year out of the NEC. I think if they win a game, then it's a completely different discussion. But if they just make the tournament, because they were 6 minutes away from it this year, I think if they make it and win a game, upset, let's say, a 4 seed or even a 3 seed, then yeah, it's a different discussion, and she might move on. But
Tom,
we'll
what
see.
about you? Quickly.
And not even just that, like winning the NEC and going to the tournament, but they had that game against Marist in this MAC championship this past season, and had they won that, you could have also probably heard Trisha Fabry's name a couple on discussion as well, because they were, as you just said, they were close to going to the NCAA tournament this past season. So it could have happened. If they, and I completely agree with Dylan, if they go to the tournament this year, then I could see coaches and other schools taking a look at her. But if they don't make the tournament, I don't think it's going to happen. And just a quick thing, Morey, Trisha Fabry likes this school, and I think she's going to continue doing what she does here at Quinnipiac.
Excellent job all year, gentlemen. We're now going to bring in our hockey analyst back in for a little hockey-basketball debate now that we've broken down all 4 teams. So, guys, who will be the better team, men's, women's basketball, or men's and women's ice hockey? We'll start with the hockey analysts.
Out of the men's and women's teams individually?
Out of the 2 hockey teams, you guys should need to pick one team and argue that against the basketball guys for who's going to have the better season next year.
I think Marty and I are going to agree that it's going to be the men's hockey team. At this point, they have a pedigree of success. Now that they've made the national championship, it's going to be a basis that this team make the NCAA tournament at the very least. Next year, they're getting in 10 new freshmen, some guys who are ranked in the NHL draft and are draft prospects. There's just a new standard set for this team after their run last year.
Yeah, and you guys were just talking about the basketball teams potentially making the tournament. The last 2 seasons, the men's hockey team have made the tournament, and they won 3 games in it last year. The ECAC is gradually becoming one of the more powerful conferences in the entire nation. So every year, they're going to be competing for at-large bids because there's going to be more exposure. The last 2 national champions have come out of the ECAC. This year, 3 more teams came in. Union, obviously, the ECAC automatic bid, but 2 at-large teams in Quinnipiac and Colgate. So I just think the recruiting class they come in, they're bringing in a lot of new young talent on top of the talent they brought in last year. They got a good core group, really solid defensively. They got good goaltending coming in for the next couple of years as well. I think they're obviously going to be the best team next year as well.
Guys, we're going to go with men's basketball, and this is why. And first, I just want to touch on hockey for a second. The women's ice hockey team just had a great season, one of the best in program history, but they're losing a lot of pieces. Amanda Collin, Shelby Wignall, Kelly Babstock, obviously. The men's team, yes, they're bringing in a great recruiting class, but they're young, they're inexperienced, they haven't played college hockey before. We don't know how they're going to do. It's going to be a very young offense for the men's ice hockey team. We're going to go with men's basketball because Zaid Hurst and Usman Drame are going to be on a mission to make the NCAA tournament in their last year. Evan Conti as well. Usman Drame is a potential NBA prospect, and he will be in a summer league after next season.
But you can make the same argument for Matt Pekka. He's a potential NHL player. He's going to be as motivated as the seniors on the basketball team.
But there's more experience on the men's basketball team than the men.
The hockey team went to the national championship 2 years ago. What else would you possibly need for experience?
And I'm also going to say that
2 years
with the men's prospects, a lot of guys Rand Pecknold brings in are 20-year-olds. A lot of other teams.
But how many college hockey games have they played?
None, but I mean, these guys have been playing for 12, 15 years. They have a lot of
As is every
Usman
Division
Drame's
I player, Gabby.
Zaid Hurst has been playing basketball for a very long time as well.
The way that I'm looking at this, it's got to be the basketball teams because, as Dylan just touched upon, several of these players on this team are on a mission. And the players like head coach Tom Moore is going to be bringing in for this team is going to help them get to that point.
Every Division I athlete should be on a mission to make the tournament and win a national championship.
Let me just touch on the recruits that you were talking about for men's hockey. They're coming in, and I completely agree with Dylan.
Tom, I want to see you guys talk about basketball. I don't need you guys to talk about hockey. That's not your job.
All right, well, the way that men's basketball, what the recruits are coming in, they're really, the way that these athletes are, they're going to be replacing guys like Ike Azatam who have left, and they're going to be basically in those positions. Hockey, it's going to take a little bit more time because they're young. And like the way that
they're going to be just as much ice time as any of those players will be getting court time. The Joneses, arguably the 2 best players in program history for the men's hockey team, are gone. They need replacements. You're going to see plenty of new players on that ice in the offensive standpoint.
Dylan, how about the basketball team?
This men's basketball team will have the best season out of the 4 sports. I'm not saying the men's basketball team is going to have a great season. I said that wouldn't happen in the previous questions. I'm just saying out of the 4 teams, they will have the best season because they're experienced players. They know what to do. They're on a mission to win the MAC championship. Usman Drame, Evan Conti, and Zaid Hurst, the 3 core seniors for this team are on a mission, okay? And this leadership, talking with the recruits and the underclassmen, they will have the best season.
Guys, thank you for your dedication all season. We truly do thank you. for your support. Well, that does it for the first segment, but when we come back, we will discuss both the baseball and the men's lacrosse teams, including an interview with a star athlete. Don't go away. You're watching the Q30 Sports Spring Semester Recap.
The Bobcat Shop, located at 1010 Sherman Avenue in Hamden. Your #1 choice for Bobcat merchandise. The Bobcat Shop features 2 floors of countless styles and colors. With a full 19,000 square foot screen printing and embroidery operation on the premises, Campus Customs and Simplify can design and decorate any garment or promotional product as quickly as needed. Stop in and say hi.
I could really go for a Ray and Mike sub right now.
Come to Ray and Mike's and try our Philly chicken with cheese for just over $4, giant cheesesteak subs, and mouth-watering boar's head sandwiches for as low as $4.75. Q-Cash accepted just a mile down the road on Whitney, here at Ray and Mike's.
I now bring in Arthur Bailin and Dylan Fearon to talk some men's lacrosse. Gentlemen, talk a little bit about the season and what you saw as a whole.
Well, Morey, Arthur, what I saw was a lot of great individual seasons, and as a team, a lot of weaknesses. Gil Connors had a sensational year in goal, 57% save percentage, which is great in men's lacrosse. Dylan Webster had 34 points and had a great senior year. There were other guys, sophomores and juniors, that had great seasons. Freshman Zach Vihar had a great second half to the season. What I noticed was the top 7 points leaders for Quinnipiac, there was only one senior, Dylan Webster, with 34 points. This team's going to be solid next year, too. Even without Gil Connors in goal, I liked Michael Sagal doing his thing with the assists this season. But I saw them really not show up to the games in the first quarter. They really had to bounce back in the fourth and surge in the fourth, and that led to a lot of losses. They didn't start games as good as they should have.
Yeah, Dylan, you're absolutely right. I mean, Zach Vihar coming into this program has really given the Bobcats an incredible boost. He really kept the Bobcats in a few games. One game in particular that stands out to me is Canisius, where in the second half he had an unbelievable time against one of the best face-off specialists in the country. He really kept the Bobcats in that game. And that Bobcats comeback that fell just 1 goal short would not have happened if it wasn't for Zach Vihar.
Right, and it's really unfortunate that they finished 3-3 in the MAC because they were tied with 5 other teams. And due to the tiebreaker, they ended up just falling short of the MAC playoffs, tied 3-3. The leader is 6-0, and Monmouth was last at 0-6. Very unfortunate they couldn't make it, but overall, a solid year, just very unfortunate.
Arthur, Dylan mentions the dominant play of Gil Connors. Now, he wasn't really able to come through down the stretch. What did you see and why he struggled? Was it the defense giving up open shots, or what did you feel like was happening?
I saw a little bit of a lackadaisical play in the part of the defense. In terms of goaltending, lacrosse is not very easy. We were discussing before this program, 50% in terms of save percentage is one of the better save percentages you can have, a little bit lower. You're still in good shape. So while Gil Connors was posting these 60% save percentages earlier in the year, those are fantastic. But to move down to like 50%, that's not by any means a step. It's a step down, but it's certainly not a catalyst for why this team suffered the way they did. I just saw some lackadaisical defensive play. In particular, the Canisius game, I believe the turnover market was fairly even, but what Canisius did with those turnovers is what sort of set them apart from the Bobcats.
Right, but it was also just starting games strong, and that's what they didn't do. And Arthur, you mentioned the Canisius game. They were down 11-4, and they outscored the Golden Griffins 6-0 in the fourth quarter to make it 11-10, and they just missed out on sending the game to overtime. If they started games really hot and strong defensively, defense intensity really early on, then they would have probably finished, I think, 4-2, maybe even 5-1, and they would have been sitting at a 2 seed in the MAC playoffs.
Dylan, it's just small mistakes that really cost them this year.
Agreed.
Gentlemen, do you think it was the defense that kept this Bobcats team from earning a postseason berth, or were there other factors?
I mean, I personally think it was the defense because, like I said before, goaltending is a very difficult job in lacrosse, and the fact that Gil Connors was able to help this team as much as he did has been a godsend this season. But the defense, like I said, has been very lackadaisical. They're not closing shooting lanes. They're not taking the body when they need to. They're letting offenses really walk over them. And I think that's really what happened. I mean, attacking-wise, they have been kind of streaky. Again, we keep coming back to the Canisius game, but it was such an important game. They started out pretty flat, even though I can't really put too much blame on the attackers because the ball really spent most of the time in the Quinnipiac defensive end. But when they did have the ball, they didn't do a whole much with it. And when they did get the ball in the fourth quarter, though, they were able to really sort of put themselves back in the game. So I think it really was the defense.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for stopping by and recapping this men's lacrosse season. Next year, they do look to improve upon it. In Dan Skip Gooley's final campaign as a Division I baseball head coach, he has put his team into prime position to compete in the postseason with a shot of making the NCAA tournament. Despite starting the year 6-16, the Bobcats used a 9-game winning streak to get within one game of 500 last week. Following consecutive 5-3 losses to the University of Hartford and the University of Connecticut, Quinnipiac was swept this past weekend by Radford. Sitting in second place with a 10-3 record in the MAC, the Bobcats have relied on strong starting pitching, a durable bullpen, and timely hitting. Shanna McCarriston sat down with freshman pitcher Matthew Osieja earlier in the week to talk about the team's success and more.
I'm here with Quinnipiac baseball player Matthew Osieja. Matt, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you. So how has the transition been from high school to college baseball?
It's been different. I mean, in high school everything's pretty easy, you know, you get on a roll and then you can keep going, but in college, you know, you have to manage many different things, including school, your spare time, and then the baseball aspect of everything.
What has the hardest part been for you?
I guess I would have to say that the transition being with school, you have to balance your schoolwork, because with baseball being 5 hours a day, and then you have friends, no parents, you have to figure out what to do with your own time, so you have to manage your time and get your schoolwork done so you're able to play.
How have you been able to be so successful just as a freshman, as a pitcher?
Basically, it's just going in there with the right mentality. It's still the game of baseball. If you're here, you're doing something, you've obviously shown that physically you can play baseball, and it's just your mentality now. If you go in there thinking that you're gonna do well, then you're gonna do well. I mean, if you go in there with the right mentality, there's no one stopping you.
Has there been a teammate that have been influential to you over this past school year?
I would have to say that since I'm a pitcher, I spend a lot of time with the pitching staff, the others on the staff, and the upperclassmen like Matthew Lorenzetti, Gary Binkowitz. They really help you get the game down mentally and understand what you have to do, and that you can perform at this level and that you're here for a reason.
How have you been able to overcome some of the predictions for this year for your team?
I mean, being the underdog, I mean, not everyone likes it, but I kind of like it because there's no pressure. You can just go out there and play your game and take over. And I think us as a team, that we just came out there with a fire within us just to prove everyone wrong.
You said play your game. How is your pitching style maybe a little bit different, or describe your pitching style?
Well, as a pitcher, I don't throw 95. I'm not going to throw the ball past anyone, so I have to stick to myself and spot up with my pitches, and also be accurate with my pitches and make sure I get ahead of batters instead of trying to throw the ball by them and be somebody I'm not.
So going on to the MAC, you were coming off a 9-game winning streak, then you had a 5-game losing streak. What was the difference between those two areas in your game?
I don't think the losing streak reflects how we were playing. I think we were playing really good ball still throughout. We played UConn real well, and and we played Hartford, and sometimes it's baseball. It can go either way. I mean, we were still playing very good ball. We came back from a rough series at Radford, but I don't think that's going to slow us down. We're just going to keep on playing good baseball.
How are you going to prepare for the future games?
I think physically we've done all the preparation in the preseason, working hard, coming together as a team. Now it's just mentally preparing, and that's all about your mindset, thinking you can beat anyone any day.
Do you prepare differently for conference games than you do out of conference games?
No, I think the team goes in with the same killer instinct, trying to take the win and add it to our win column and get ahead.
How important is it for you guys to win those MAC games?
The MAC games are what everyone works for. That's what we want to win, because to make it to the playoffs and then hopefully to the NCAA regionals all depend on how we do in the MAC.
And now switching over to coaching, you're going to get a new coach next year. What is that going to be like for you? What is that adjustment going to be like?
I don't think it's going to be that big of an adjustment, since Coach Delaney is here already, acting as I think he's an associate head coach currently. And so we are getting used to his coaching style now as well. So I don't think it's going to be a big transition for the returning members of the team, but it will be hard to lose our head coach, Skip, who's been here for, I think, like 30 years.
All right, thanks, Matt, so much for stopping by. Back to you guys.
Albanese and Nick Dench, thank you for stopping by, gentlemen.
Anytime.
Anytime, no problem.
The baseball team has turned it around from this past year. What has impressed you guys the most about this team so far?
You know, I think it's the balanced pitching. The hitting still isn't where I would like this team to be at, especially when they've had a couple guys who have played in this level for 2 or 3 years now. They're still not hitting the way that I expected them to. The only player hitting over 300 is Vin Galletti, and he has been their best hitter the last couple of years, so I expected it out of him. But their balanced pitching, especially with the youth, they lost their ace from last year, Derek Lamacchia, and I mean, he wouldn't be pitching for this team anyways after having Tommy John surgery. But when you have those 3 freshman pitchers at the top of your staff and they're still doing such a great job, you can't take away from what the pitching's been.
Yeah, the pitching staff for the Bobcats has definitely been there this year, led by Thomas Jenkins, Justin Thomas, and Brandon Shalakis. Obviously, these 3 pitchers have been at the top of this rotation this season, and they've done a great job. Their ERAs, they've started out the season a little bit rough, but they have been able to lower it as the season has gone on. And I agree with your point, Nick, that the hitting is not exactly where it should be for this team. Obviously, you have so many other pieces outside of Vin Galletti that really need to contribute on the offense, but in some areas we have not seen that this season, and in other areas, especially during the 9-game winning streak, they did a great job of that, but that was mostly led by their pitching. So obviously the pitching has definitely impressed me the most as well, just as Nick pointed out.
Like I mentioned earlier, this team was on a 9-game winning streak, and now they're currently on a 5-game losing streak. Entering the final tier of its schedule, will this streak break their confidence?
I don't think it will, Morey, because keep in mind that these 5 straight losses have all been against out-of-conference foes, and losing 5-3 to both Hartford and UConn, and then obviously getting swept by Radford over this past weekend. This team, being in the MAC for the first season, I think even plays a huge part in this, because they're starting to play tougher out-of-conference opponents, and Skip Gooley knew that going into this season, and he really tried to schedule these games that could help them prepare for those MAC contests, and it obviously has helped them to really being impressive so far, being in second place behind Siena with a 10-3 conference record. Obviously, the big tests are going to be coming this weekend when they face the defending champion Canisius at home, and obviously at season's end when they travel to Siena. So obviously, at the end of the season, we're obviously going to see where the Bobcats are, obviously in the standings heading into the playoffs, but that's where the real tests are going to be. And I don't think these out-of-conference matchups have really affected them that much.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to affect them too much, but it will hurt their confidence a little bit. They should have beat UConn. Matthew Osieja had an awful 8th inning, and you take that 8th inning out, they win that game 3-1. They play very strong defense, but then you bring in that very young player against an experienced UConn team, and that's what Canisius is. Canisius is a very experienced team, so if they can get rattled, those young guys get rattled, this is going to be a very interesting way to end the season if their confidence continues to go down to where it's been now.
Nick, I want to ask you this last question first. You've been here the longest. What is Dan Skip Gooley's legacy?
He's been this team's coach forever. He knows this school. He's really formed this baseball team, this baseball program, and to see what he's done with the program, yeah, he's had his very lows, but he's brought the team to the NCAA tournament a couple times. So he knows how to win. He's done it with this team for so long, and he's passing it on to one of his successors who's been working for him for a long time. with John Delaney. So I think he's done a very good job shaping it and really making this a respectable program in the Northeast.
Tom, you?
Skip Gooley, you guys, really has been this icon for this baseball program, and I couldn't agree more with you, Nick. He's really brought this team to a completely new level. In his coaching career, keep in mind, but with both Quinnipiac and Hartford, 11 20-win seasons, that's just amazing. Obviously, on the other end of it, there were those several losing seasons, maybe even some where they had less than 10 wins in the season. So obviously, it's been kind of a roller coaster coaching career, but in the end, he took this team, as Nick mentioned, to the NCAA tournament a couple times, even their first College World Series appearance back in 1983. So obviously, Skip Gooley has been the face of the Bobcats for a long time, and John Delaney is the perfect guy to take over this program, being the successor and being the associate head coach with Skip Gooley over the last several years.
Guys, thank you for stopping by.
The Bobcat Shop, located at 1010 Sherman Avenue in Hamden. Your #1 choice for Bobcat merchandise. The Bobcat Shop features 2 floors of countless styles and colors. With a full 19,000 square foot screen printing and embroidery operation on the premises, Campus Customs and Simplify can design and decorate any garment or promotional product as quickly as needed. Stop in and say hi.
I could really go for a Ray and Mike sub right now.
Come to Ray and Mike's and try our Philly chicken with cheese for just over $4, giant cheesesteak subs, and mouth-watering boar's head sandwiches for as low as $4.75. Q Cash accepted just a mile down the road on Whitney, here at Ray and Mike's.
The women's lacrosse team did not have quite the season they were hoping for. Finishing with a 2-13 record, Danny Carr's team graduates 8 seniors, but has a bright future returning a core of solid freshmen, Kira Aquat and goalie Samantha Tiltz. Gentlemen, why were the Bobcats unable to win a few more games and have a shot to make the playoffs?
Well, Arthur, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. One particular statistic that really stood out to me for this team was the fact that they were really killed on draw controls. And I've been saying it all season long. If you don't control the face-offs, you will not control the pace of the game. And that is even more true in women's lacrosse, because the only way you're going to force turnover is a save, or the team just commits an error or commits an infraction and the ball goes the other way. And the Bobcats, except for the Iona game, they were outdrawn every single game this year. One game that in particular that really stands out is the Marist game, where they were outdrawn 25-7. And to be perfectly frank, that's inexcusable. And from the NEC into the MAC, this is really a step up. You're not playing the lower level teams like Wagner, or I guess Wagner would be a good example. You're playing teams like Fairfield and Siena, lacrosse powerhouses. So you really got to bring your A game, and the Bobcats really didn't do that this year.
Well, it wasn't just little mistakes. I'm going with a big aspect, and that was the attack. Aside from Kira Aquat, who had 60-plus points this season in her junior campaign, they only had 3 players with 20-plus points. They brought in Kelly Babstock, but she only started 4 games, played 10 total, but only started 4, had 20 points or so. I think they only had 3 players with 20 points or more, and I think on the attack, they really struggled, and especially just with the men's, I think starting games they also struggled as well. 2-13 looks really bad, but for a rebuilding team that's going to be rebuilding even more and going from the NEC to the MAC, I mean, that's kind of what I expected from the year.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Dylan, because Michaela Tinsley had a very good offensive season last year, and this season she just fell flat.
Right.
And if she had better offensive production, this season could look a lot different. But you hit the nail right on the head, Dylan. It's a rebuilding year, and this is the first year in the MAC. This is the first time they've seen a lot of these teams. So I'm not really concerned just yet about this team in terms of long-term goals.
You guys mentioned the jump from the NEC to the MAC, but how crucial is it that this team performs and does well next year? Because since making the NCAA tournament in 2011, Danny Carr's squad has had 3 sub-500 seasons in a row.
Right. It's a rebuilding year, so I don't know how much pressure there is on her as a coach, if that's what you're saying, but I think the pressure lies in terms of the team wants to perform well for Kira Aquat in her senior year, in her final year as a Bobcat. They're going to be really going after it, especially on the attack. I think the freshmen this year who performed well are going to perform even better as sophomores, and I think they can pull out a 6, maybe even 7-win season.
Morey, I need a little clarification. What do you mean by how crucial is it?
Danny Caro has had 3 sub-500 seasons, so is her, for lack of a better term, job on the line?
No, of course not. I don't know what you're expecting from this team.
This team had a loss in double overtime and a loss.
They made the NCAA tournament in 2011. In 2013, they were above 500 in the conference. This is the first year in the MAC. What do you want from them?
Arthur, they had chances to win games and make the playoffs.
Morey, you're playing Fairfield. You're playing Siena. These are big-time programs.
Arthur,
what do you want from them?
Arthur Bailin. We've seen coaches all around the NCAA that have taken their team to the NCAA tournament and then 3 years later been
look
fired.
at the region that Quinnipiac has to recruit from. They mainly recruit from the Connecticut and New England area. Now look at the other programs in this area. You have
so recruit elsewhere. It's time to go elsewhere.
You have the Ivies. This is a lacrosse hotbed in terms of college programs. If Quinnipiac is serious about making their lacrosse programs stronger, they have to do a couple things. First of all, the turf complex, I know they're planning on renovating it. They need to go from turf complex to turf stadium, first of all. Second of all, they need to start...
Arthur, it all starts with coaching, though.
No, the bottom line, the team has done well. This is, like you said, it's a rebuilding year. Last year, they were over 500 in the conference. I have no idea what you want from them.
To perform. To win.
They performed last year. This is a rebuilding year. This is their first year in the MAC.
Better.
This is the first time
That's what we want.
We
want them to be better, Arthur.
Gentlemen, thank you for the energized debate. Arthur, we love your enthusiasm. Dylan, excellent job as well.
Thanks for having me, Morey.
You're welcome. The women's softball team is fighting for a playoff spot. With 4 conference games remaining, the Bobcats have an outside shot to clinch a postseason berth. They need to win all 4 games and have a couple other things happen with teams to slide in the last spot. Their season has been highlighted by mammoth home runs by Jordan Palucci and the first no-hitter in Quinnipiac history by Hannah Lindley. Of their 11 conference losses, 5 of them have been by 2 runs or less. Gentlemen, why have they been unable to pull out these wins in late in the games?
You know, it's their pitching staff. As close as these games are going to be, their pitching staff has been atrocious this year, and they're still trying to find a replacement for Heather Schwartzberg, who graduated 2 years ago. And Sydney Roby has definitely improved over the course of the season. Hannah Lindsley with that no-hitter, but that's really been the only highlight for her season. And Katie Alfieri, the most experienced of the 3 pitchers, is sporting a +10 ERA. She needs to find a way to get that down these last 4 games if they want any chance to do it. The hitting's been there. Roby's not getting the run support that she deserves. But overall, it's been the pitching. That's really been their big issue all season long, and they're going to need to figure it out if they want any chance to make the tournament.
Yeah, the pitching is definitely the main reason why this team has been struggling. At a 10-32 record, it shows clearly that your pitching is not getting off to that quick start early in the game, and it's impacting them, obviously, as the game goes on. This team does have a lot of pieces to hit, obviously, outside of Jordan Palucci, but unfortunately, they're just not producing at the rate that many people are expecting them to. Courtney Salt, she's been that go-to guy, that go-to player, at the top of the lineup. But certain occasions she has produced, and other occasions she just has not done that. And outside of those 2 ladies, there's not really another productive batter in this lineup. So along with the pitching, as Nick talked about, the hitting, it's been there several times, like Nick had mentioned, but the other times they just have been not able to do well, and they've been able to lose games. They're losing games in like 5 innings.
The majority of this team returns for next year, guys. So what's the ceiling for this team next year?
You know, I think they're going to be a much better team next year. You're going to lose Alfieri pitching-wise, but Jill Karwowski's getting her first actual recruiting class in. She got hired late last season after Jermaine Fairchild left the school. So I think it's going to be a much better year next year. They're going to have most of their hitting back. Jordan Palucci comes back for her redshirt senior year. Alex Alba comes back. They're only losing Katie Alfieri. So with the experience that comes to Sydney Roby and Hannah Lindsley, the pitchers, I really think that they should improve and they should be in contention for it, maybe a 3 spot in the MAC tournament next year.
This team is going to have an incredibly high ceiling, next season because, I mean, there's 3 different factors that come into the situation that they were put in this season. Jill Karowski comes in, first-year head coach. They're their first season in the MAC, and they only have 1 senior on this team, and Katie Alfieri, obviously, outside of Ashley Winslow, who comes with the team later. But this is a team that is a young team with only the 2 seniors, like I just mentioned, and they were put directly into like the fire in the heat of a situation where a much tougher conference in the Northeast Conference, and under a first-year head coach that, as Nick pointed out, didn't have her recruiting class since she got hired late in the season. This is a team that has all the pieces, and I think with another year to prep for next season, they're going to get better.
Tom, thank you for your efforts this year. And Nick, thank you personally for you being on the show week in and week out. We always loved having you.
I'm always glad to be here.
The women's tennis team defeated the Fairfield Stags 4-1 in the MAC championship to earn their first trip to the NCAA tournament since 2011 this past weekend. The team will travel to California to face the 9th-ranked Stanford Cardinal next Friday. The match will begin at 1 p.m. Well, that wraps up the second semester of Quinnipiac Sports. We look forward to having an even more productive and innovative year as we've had this year. For more information on Quinnipiac Sports, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Q30 Sports. And don't forget to check out our website at www.q30television.com. For all of our dedicated personnel behind the scenes, our talented analysts, and our guest athletes, I'm Morey Hershgordon. Have a safe summer, and we look forward to seeing all of you in the fall.